Texture is how something feels. Artists use texture in artwork in many different ways. One way is to create an actual texture in their artwork, like in this painting, where you can see there are lots of raised areas. Or in this artwork, where they used a lot of soft materials to create artwork. Another way that artists use texture is implied texture. This is when you draw something on a flat surface, but you can see a texture in whatever they are creating. So in this drawing, we see a bunch of different textures in these cubes. In this drawing, we can see some smooth surfaces. And in this drawing, we can see the fluffy hairs of the cat and the dog. Now, you can't actually feel these. If you felt this, it would just feel like paper. But you can see the texture in all of these artworks. Now let's look at some textures. In your head, think about how these would feel if you were to touch them in real life. So today we are going to create 5 implied textures. You're going to start by carefully tracing around your hand in pencil first. Then I decided to write 5 textures that were very different than each other on each finger. Now I can erase this later. So I chose rough, smooth, hairy, bumpy, and sharp. Now really pay attention to how I'm making each texture look like what I wrote down. So for the rough one, I decided to make kind of like a rocky area on my finger. I made some deep cracks, and some of the rocky areas are bumping out away from where I originally had my finger. I'm also adding some cracks to it. This makes it look a lot more dry and rough. For the smooth one, I decided to do a wooden texture. So I just made a ton of wooden rings. The hairy one, I made a ton of hair strokes. The bumpy one, I made a bunch of bumps coming out from the finger, along with some circles inside of the finger. And for the sharp one, I made some really jagged edges coming out away from my thumb and inside of my thumb. Once you have that all drawn in pencil, you may want to go over it with a Sharpie. I chose a thin Sharpie because I was more easily able to show the details with a thin Sharpie rather than a regular size Sharpie. Once you're all done going over everything, make sure that you erase everything nice and neat. I decided to also erase all of the words that said sharp, bumpy, hairy, smooth, and rough. Now you can start to add color. Here's where you're really going to want to show your texture. So with the smooth texture, I made the finger look a little bit more rounded by making the edges darker and the middle a lighter color. With the rough one, I decided to make the cracks really dark and the rocky parts much lighter. With the hairy one, I colored it in blue, and then I added some more darker hair strokes. With the bumpy one, I colored it one color, and then I made each of my bumps look more like smears by adding some darker areas. With the sharp areas, I colored everything one color, and then I added some darker areas where I thought there would be shadows. Once I was done with that, I decided I wanted the colors to fade down into more of a skin color. Now this is up to you. You could make the entire hand just one weird color, or you could do what I did, where I just chose a bunch of random colors, and then I faded them down into a skin color. The skin color that I chose was in crayon, so if you want to grab a crayon to do this part, you could do that. Now here's where you can really show your creativity. You get to do whatever you'd like with your background. You could make words like how I wrote texture in the background. You could create a pattern in the background. You could create more textures in the background. Or you could create a place or a location for your hand. It's up to you, but you do need to do something in your background.